Hey guys, this is D.I.D. Choi. A lot of people on the internet are having debates about the importance or the non-importance of gain staging, and there are a lot of misconceptions and myths surrounding it, especially in today's world where we're working in digital audio workstations and not the analog world. Some people have different arguments for whether gain staging is important or not. So we'll hop in and I'll demonstrate why gain staging is important for my workflow and why I still do it despite being in the digital realm. So is gain staging important? Technically, no. Because as we can demonstrate here, if I turn this up and turn this audio down, so we don't blow out our headphones, and let's say this is at 12 dB. So this is definitely clipping. This is above 0 dB. If I press play, you can see in the meters that we are at plus 12 dB, and this is clipping. It's too loud. It's above 0, which is not good. But if you listen to that white noise, as harsh and terrible as it sounds, it didn't actually sound like it was distorting. It was just the white noise very loud. Even though I turned it down quite a bit, it's still very loud. And that's because Logic has, I think it's like 32-bit oversampling stuff. I really don't know what the actual terminology behind it is. But because it's in the digital realm, it actually saves everything and it doesn't go into hard digital clipping like you would expect. Other softwares like Pro Tools, I believe, does clip. But the way Logic works, it doesn't. So if you're working in Logic and you don't gain stage and you have things clipping and things not clipping, it's fine. But gain staging is important, especially when you're working together with other people, whether that's receiving files of recordings from different places or instrumentalists, or whether you're sending your tracks out to be mixed or your actual session to be mixed. Gain staging is very important because it sets expectations and it kind of sets like a standard level for everything. And I'll explain what that means. So this white noise here, let's take it back to 0 dB. This is basically normalized white noise. It's not clipping, but everything is basically at 0. Now, to gain stage this properly, when I open the level meter, I want our signal to be hitting negative 18-ish on average. Some peaks might go over, some peaks might go under. Now, in this case with white noise, because everything is at a consistent level, since this is normalized to 0, if I just set it to negative 18 dB, which I generally do with the clip gain here in the region gain, then if I press play, still it's going to be loud. So if you have headphones, beware. Here we go. You see, we are hitting a very nice, healthy level that is peaking at negative 18 dB. Now, because some of the stuff was actually quieter, I might do negative 17 dB so that it's more averagely hitting the 18 dB mark. Right? That's a good, healthy signal. Now, why negative 18 dB? That is basically the equivalent of unity for the analog world. So if I pull up this SSL and have this level meter as well, our level should basically be hitting this 0 mark right here, which is unity. It's also the point where on a lot of analog gear, you're going to be having the green meters going into the orange meters. So having your average level just sit around that mark is going to be a very nice healthy level. And it gives you plenty of headroom in case you have very loud sections in whatever part you're doing. So let's take a look at what this white noise looks like with the SSL. Right, we're hitting just around the 0 mark, just around the negative 18 digital mark. So that is how to gain stage, right? Whether you're using a gain plugin or the clip gain, or you're setting your audio interface gain, you want to go for an average level of negative 18 dB FS, I believe. Don't really know what those extra letters mean, but I believe it's at negative 18 dB FS. All right, so let's try gain staging this acoustic guitar. So I'm pulling up the level meter again. We can see it's kind of at an average level between 30 and negative 24. So to get it to negative 18, what if I push it around 9 dB? Let's see how we do. So with an acoustic guitar, it's not like the white noise where it's a consistent sustained sound. You're going to have transients, you're going to have quieter parts, you're going to have sustained parts. So generally, like the peaks are going to be above negative 18, while your kind of average level you want to set to negative 18. At least that's how I do it. So this is a pretty good healthy level because we're hitting and we're kind of sticking around that negative 18. We have some peaks that are going up to even negative 11, but that's why we're setting it to negative 18, so we have headroom to grow. And obviously none of this is actually going to be clipping, which is going to be good. Lastly, let's try this piano sample. Right, and this is a stereo file, so the two sides will be a little different because they're playing a little heavier on the right side of the keyboard with their right hand. The right side is a little louder. Okay, I'm just gonna give it like maybe a 5 dB push. Right, and the transients are a little sharper on the piano and the sustains are longer. So generally we are gonna have bigger peaks on the piano. But still, I want to aim for like a good healthy level that's averaging around -18, right? Okay, so that's how to gain stage. Now, why would you gain stage? Other than being a control freak and being some relic of the analog world, which I'm not because I didn't really live in the analog world. But it's good because you can set things like thresholds in your templates, in your presets, and as long as you gain stage everything consistently, you should be able to expect to know where to set your threshold to get X dB of reduction. So what I mean is, because I set my gain to -18, if I set my peak reduction to unity, which is marked 50 on this particular compressor, I should be getting a healthy level of compression where only the stuff that actually peaks above 18 is being compressed. So let's take a look at how our compression does. Right, if we open our level meter, we see that there's things going up to -11, up to -8. So it's reasonable to expect that we're gonna have anywhere between, 6 to 10 dB of compression for those peaks. Now, if we look at the guitar, should be getting a very healthy level of compression because we had it a lot closer to -18. And the peaks were only going a tiny bit above, so we're getting like 3 dB compression at most, which is exactly what I want for most acoustic guitar recordings. If we look at the white noise in this case, because there are no transients at all, I should be expecting almost 0 dB, just slight bits of compression. Right? Now we set it to -17, so it is going to be 1 dB above the threshold. And the ratio of this particular compressor is like 4:1-ish, I believe, for a LE2A. So it's going to be a lot less than 1 dB of compression, right? So in this way, we can expect to know how a compressor will react. Now, what if I just use digital compressors and the analog stuff doesn't matter to me, right? If we look at the Platinum compressor, which is a digital compressor, and this one also doesn't distort if you push it above 0 dB, unless you set it to these distortion settings here. Okay, so if I put the knee all the way, because that's what I like to do for a nice, subtle, transparent compression. Okay, so auto gain off, by the way. Hate auto gain, just set it yourself. Now, I might say, I know I want about 3 dB of makeup gain at the end because I'm going to be compressing 3 dB. How will I know if I'm going to be compressing 3 dB without actually playing the audio yet? Well, if I set this to -18 again, unity, of course, and we have all of our settings at a medium-ish speed, we should be not getting that much compression at all, actually. So just those tiny peaks are being slightly compressed, but it's less than even a dB. Now, because I know that this is what 18 dB is going to be, and if I want to have about 3 dB of compression, because the ratio is 4, maybe I'm going to go about to -28-ish. Let's see how much compression that gives me. Okay, that gives me 4, so let's bring it down a bit, maybe 26. Right? So that gives me a pretty good level of compression. I could also go to -32 or so. That should give me anywhere between 5 and 6. Right? So because my gain stage is very consistent, I know what threshold levels are going to give me what dB of compression for a certain ratio, right? It's just a lot more predictable that way. Same goes for stuff like tape machines. If I set the tape machine to unity, it's not going to give me that much coloring. But if I begin to push it a little bit into the red, that's going to give me more saturation and it'll be consistent no matter what the source is. So this is just hitting the red here, which is, maybe amount of saturation that I want. Let's try playing the piano now. It should be giving us a similar amount. Again, the peaks are going to be a little bit more, so sometimes it hits farther, especially the right side. You can see it's hitting a lot farther. But, just in general, you know what you're getting. So if I play the white noise, we're going to get a pretty healthy in the red kind of level. Right? So gain staging allows you to predict and expect what's going to happen. And if you're working on like hundreds of tracks every year, maybe even more, maybe less, but if you're working on a lot of stuff for many hours of the day, you want to have a kind of base level consistency. So if you get a new session in front of you, you know where to start. Now, let's say, for example, I take all of the gain staging off of these, set everything back to 0 clip gain. If I were to use just the faders to balance these into a kind of equal-ish level, I know I'm going to have to take the white noise way down, so let me just start doing that. Okay. I might have to boost the acoustic a little. Right. Obviously, these are not from the same track, so they sound terrible together, but pretending that I am doing a mix, this is supposed to be my starting point. And if a client were to send me this session to mix, then I take a look at this and I think, okay, so the client wants the acoustic guitar to shine at the very top, the piano is kind of in the middle, and this white noise is like just a pad that's way in the background. It shouldn't be heard. Is what I think when I just look at the faders, but then when I press play, I see that everything is kind of at the same level, which is going to be confusing. Do they want everything to sound at the same level? Do they want the acoustic guitar at the top? Is it just bad gain staging? It's just confusing. If everything is gain staged properly, I can expect exactly what I want. With all these faders set to 0, I have a good starting point and I know exactly where I'm going to be going. Same applies to sending bus effects for reverbs, for example. I know that sending, 0 dB is going to be a certain amount of reverb. I know that -12 is going to be a certain amount, -24 is going to be a certain amount. Obviously, you should always be using your ears. But as I'm saying, if everything is gain staged properly, you can just predict and you have a base level and a reference point that works in most cases. So that's going to save me a lot more time. If I have a template with preset compressors with different thresholds, if I have different reverb send amounts, obviously I would go through each plugin and make sure everything's behaving the way I want it to. But it's going to save me so much time because I have a starting point that will always work, right? It might not be the best mix, but it'll be a mix that works because I can be confident that my template will work no matter what source I'm dealing with. Now finally, one more side note, I want to address orchestral libraries because this channel is mostly about orchestral stuff. Orchestral libraries, I would not gain stage. I would not set them to -18 dB because most of the time they are pre-mixed and they are recorded in a way that is actually going to be a lot quieter than -18 dB because if you think about if I'm miking an orchestra, I need to have enough headroom so that when the cymbal crashes and the bass drum hits, nothing clips. Now, if I set my gain so that that is at a healthy level, when the flute player plays a solo, that's going to be way, way quiet because that's just how audio works, right? So sample libraries are often going to be mixed a little quieter and they are going to be mixed kind of at a consistent level to each other. So if I were to use the whole Cinematic Studio series, each library is actually balanced against each other, and within the library, each instrument is balanced against each other, right? So everything's leveled in its proper place. You don't want to really adjust that unless you're trying to boost something or, that's your base level. It's pre-gain stage for you, and that doesn't mean the signal is at a good healthy level, like -18 decibels, but more that the whole orchestra is balanced for you. Now, different libraries will have different reference points, so of course I will go in and balance each library separately, but within that, the section itself, generally, I don't even have to. Now, some libraries are a little inconsistent, like Spitfire. Each articulation is going to be at a different level. I don't know why they do that. Orchestral tools even, like the Berlin woodwinds, the clarinets are actually a lot louder than the other instruments. And that's also because there are more high dynamic layers on the clarinet. So I don't know why they have different dynamic layers for different instruments. I wish they had the same, but for something like Cinematic Studio, which I always say I love the most because it's so consistent and predictable, every instrument is going to sound at the right level against one another, right? And also when you're mixing orchestral stuff even with samples, you have to think about that headroom thing where the point where the crash cymbal comes in is going to be where you want to have your level the healthiest. It shouldn't be clipping, which means generally all your other stuff is going to be very quiet. It's going to be metering around maybe even negative 24 dB. And that's the point of orchestral music, is to have a nice big dynamic range. And you can change that in mastering later if you want, or you can do some fader riding later on, but just know that you should be expecting for your orchestral libraries to be a lot quieter than pop instruments, for example, or synths. Synths also in Logic Pro are very, very loud. This is just a random sampler instrument in Logic. If I just play a chord, you see that it's clipping. This is just the default way I pulled it up, and it's clipping already. And like I said, it's okay in Logic, but it's not desirable because now I have to turn the fader way down and it's going to look like I want it buried, but I don't. Okay, so generally I'm just going to go into my synths and turn everything down. It was already set to -5, so negative 18, negative 23 should give me a nice healthy level. Let's turn that off and play the chord again. Negative 17 peaking, right? And depending on what I'm doing, if this is a plucky sound, it's going to be more transient-y, then maybe I want more volume. If it's a sustained sound, less volume, so on and so forth. Gain staging is not always going to be the most accurate science, but it's just kind of a reference point, right? So, gain staging, important? Yes, because it's a lot more predictable and easier to work with, but is it the end of the world if you don't? Nah, especially in this digital age, unless you're using analog plugins, it really doesn't matter. Now, I hope I haven't been spreading any misconceptions in this video because there are so many misconceptions about this kind of topic. If there are any corrections that I make later on, make sure to check the description and the comments in case I issue any corrections. Also, leave comments, likes, subscribe, all that good stuff so I can continue making these videos. I really love just helping and sharing my knowledge. This has been D.I.D. Choi, and I'll see you in the next one.